In this lesson, we'll put our point groups to work and repose this front leg. I'll select this end segment of the leg, and I'll bring up my radial menu and swipe through to the soft transform node. And we see that the soft transform node gets added to the end of the network, and in the group parameter, we see that it's the group name that's being entered. This is different to the list of points that we got on this first soft transform node, after I converted the primitive selection to a point selection using the Control Shift and 2 hotkey. So when we select geometry components for an operation using the Select by Groups mode, or by clicking on a group name in a group list, it's the group name which gets entered into the group parameter. When we're working interactively in the viewport in a traditional straight-ahead approach, it doesn't make a great deal of difference whether we enter a group name or a list of component numbers into group parameters. When we're building procedural networks though, using group or attribute names in group parameters, rather than lists of specific component numbers, is a very important part of the process, and this is something we'll be looking at in detail over the next couple of courses. Now, before I start transforming this point group, I need to move my handle to the position where the joint would naturally articulate. So I'll tap the apostrophe key to detach the handle and enter the handle transform mode, and I want to snap this handle to the interior of this joint section where it meets the part which we're transforming. And to do that, I'll enable multi-snap. And I'll right click and bring up the multi-snap options. And in here, I'll choose to only snap to the primitives. I'll enable interior snapping and I'll choose normal based. I'll close this and now I'll take my handle and snap it to one of these primitives on the joint section. And if you remember from the Core Essentials course, with normal based interior snapping, the thing which we're snapping, which in this case is the handle, gets snapped to the midpoint of an imaginary line travelling through the interior of the geometry. This imaginary line is drawn from the primitive we snap to, and it's drawn along the opposite direction of that primitive's normal, until it exits the opposite side of the geometry. The midpoint of that imaginary line is where the handle's been snapped to. I'll also just rotate this handle a bit to better align it with this section of the leg. And now I'll tap the apostrophe key again to reattach the handle, and I'll also just turn off multi-snapping. Now I'll use my scroll wheel to reduce the radius of the soft selection, so that the modulation is all happening within the joint section of the leg. And now I can use the rotation handle to rotate this part of the leg upwards. And I'll also use the move handle to move it up and out a bit more. Once we've moved the geometry, we can continue to adjust the soft radius value to fine tune exactly where the transform stops having any effect. If I toggle the soft transform node on and off, we can see the effect of that edit which we've just made. I'll also adjust the articulation of the leg from this mid section. So I'll tap the S key to switch back to the select tool, and I'll hold down the shift key and click on this mid section to add this group of points to the current selection. And I also want to select the joint between these two selector sections. So I'll hold down shift and the H key and click to flood fill select all the points in between. Now I'll bring up the radial menu and I'll add another soft transform node. And this time we see that we have a list of points added to the group parameter rather than group names. And that's because I added additional points to the previous soft transform's CUC selection. As I mentioned earlier though, it doesn't make much difference whether we use group names or component numbers when we're working interactively in the viewport, because we're just working in a straight ahead fashion rather than building a procedural network of nodes. So now I've got the point selection that I want, I need to reposition my handle again. So I'll tap the apostrophe key to detach it, and I'll re-enable multi-snapping, and I'll snap the handle to a primitive on the joint selection. Like I did before, I'll also rotate the handle a bit to better align it with the leg section. And now I'll tap the apostrophe key to reattach the handle again, and I'll turn off multi-snapping. And I'll use my scroll wheel to adjust the soft radius distance. And now I can use my rotate handle to rotate this part of the leg upwards. Of course, if we were wanting to animate this, or if we wanted to create a number of different poses, then we'd spend the time building a proper rig for it. But for making a quick edit to a model, this kind of technique's usually sufficient. Once we've got these two soft transform nodes set up like this, we can continue to move between them to fine tune and tweak the pose of the leg. And of course, the benefit of having these selections saved as groups is that we can quickly and easily select them again for any other operations that we might want to perform on them. So in this section of lessons, we've seen how we work with groups interactively in the viewport. We can use groups like we would use selection sets in other applications. They're a way of saving selections of geometry components so that we can quickly reselect them at any time.